Welcome to Reformed Thinking. For this deep dive, you've brought us, well, one of the toughest books in the Bible to wrestle with, Ecclesiastes.
It really is. It gets called the black sheep in the canon all the time, and for good reason. It seems to be the one book that skeptics love to quote and, saints get a little troubled by.
That title fits so well because if you just read it on the surface, you see phrases like vanity of vanities or all is vanity, and it's really easy to walk away thinking the book is just, I don't know, ancient nihilism.
Or that it's just a counsel to despair, written by a very, very depressed king.
Exactly.
And that's why we wanted to tackle this. We're leaning on Thomas Schreiner's work on biblical theology to guide us here. The whole point is to find that God-centered message that's actually at its core.
And to do that, we have to resist those popular readings, the ones that just treat it as existential dread and strip out all the hope.
Yes. We have to read it as a part of inspired scripture.
So the big paradox is right there from the start. How can a book that says everything a person does under the sun is basically pointless, like chasing the wind, also be a part of God's divine wisdom?
That's the puzzle we have to unpack. The whole thing hinges on understanding the limits of that earthly perspective, the under the sun part, to see the sovereign answer the preacher gives in the end.
So establishing the right framework for reading it is, I guess, step one.
It's the only way. If you just approach it as a random collection of gloomy thoughts, you're guaranteed to get it wrong. The wisdom isn't in the initial raw observations of chaos. It's in the final conclusion.
Okay, so let's dig into that black sheep reputation. It's known for staring directly at the anomalies of life, right? The parts that don't fit the neat patterns.
Precisely. The common take is that it's the anti-Proverbs. Proverbs focuses on the regularities of life.
Right. Work hard, be wise, and things will generally go well for you. Act like a fool, and, well, you'll suffer the consequences.
And our source, Schreiner, points out that this is too simple, a bit too rigid of a dichotomy. The writers of Proverbs weren't naive. They knew that sometimes the righteous get crushed and the wicked get rich.
They knew the world wasn't perfectly fair, at least not in the here and now.
Sure, but the difference is focus. Proverbs gives you the general rule for living in God's ordered world. Ecclesiastes, on the other hand, just gazes intently at the irrationality and perverseness of life under the sun.
So it's a deep dive into the exceptions, the times when everything seems backwards and unfair.
Yes, the reversals, the vexations. And that's why people get tripped up. They proof text it. They pull out the darkest verses about death and toil and injustice, and they build the whole worldview from those pieces.
Without seeing the bigger picture, the whole architecture of the book.
Exactly. And if you read it apart from that canonical lens, you can make it mean anything you want. It could just be one man's diary of depression.
But in its final inspired form, it can't actually contradict the hope we find everywhere else in the Bible. It can't be teaching that what we do is meaningless just because it feels that way sometimes.
Right. The feeling of futility is an observation, not the final conclusion.
So we need the key, the lens that reframes all those dark observations. And that brings us to the conclusion of the whole book in chapter 12.
This is the hermeneutical key, the principle that governs the whole book. It's verses 13 and 14. The end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man.
And then the reason.
For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil.
That's a complete 180. If you read the first 11 chapters and think, well, nothing I do matters because we all just die, this ending just slams the door on that idea.
It would be a bizarre contradiction if the point was nihilism. It confirms two huge truths that exist above the sun, not just under it.
Okay, what are they?
First, what you do absolutely matters. It's not inconsequential. Obedience to God's commands is the whole duty of man. And second, a future judgment is coming.
A reckoning, where everything, even the secret things, gets sorted out. Good is rewarded, evil is punished.
Which means the universe is moral after all, even if it doesn't look that way from our limited vantage point.
And I find that connection between fearing God and obeying him to be so important here. Fearing God isn't just a feeling.
No, it's not an abstract emotion. It leads directly to action, to keeping his commandments. It ties Ecclesiastes right into Torah piety.
So it's not some outlier book of philosophy. It's firmly planted in the soil of Israel's covenant life with God. It's wisdom literature, just like Job and Proverbs.
It is. It's about what it looks like to live under God's rule, especially when that rule seems confusing or frustrating day to day. This isn't a book about an absent God.
Not at all. Schreiner makes the point that God is shown to be intimately involved in everything that happens.
Yes, he's sovereign, he's predetermined things, but His ways are not fully understandable to us. And because of that, the only sane response is awe and obedience.
So the conclusion isn't some awkward appendix an editor tacked on.
No, it's the destination. The whole frustrating journey through the vanity of life is designed to push us there.
And who's the guide on this journey? The preacher, or Koheleth, identifies himself as the son of David, king in Jerusalem.
So Solomon. The text deliberately puts these words in the mouth of Solomon, the wisest, richest, most powerful man who ever lived.
Which is a crucial detail, isn't it?
It's everything. Because his life is the ultimate test case. If anyone could figure out how to master life under the sun with human power and wisdom and wealth, it was him.
If he failed to find meaning, then no one else stands a chance.
Right. He says, what can the man do who comes after the king? The answer is nothing new. It's already been tried at the highest possible level.
So his failure to find meaning on his own terms sets the limit for all of us. And these aren't just his private thoughts. The book validates them as words of truth, as divine wisdom.
Coming from God, the one true shepherd. So even the observations about futility are themselves inspired lessons. They're telling us about our limits.
The observation of vanity is the diagnosis, and the fear of God is the cure.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so with that framework in place, let's look at this central idea itself, futility. The Hebrew word is hibble, and it's everywhere in the book, 37 times.
37 times. It just saturates the whole text. And vanity isn't quite the best translation, is it?
Sounds a bit abstract.
Yeah. A better image is vapor or a puff of smoke. Evil. It's real. You can see it for a moment, but it's impossible to grab. You can't hold on to it.
It's ephemeral, unsubstantial, that feeling of putting in huge effort and having nothing lasting to show for it.
That's Hebel. And it functions as this big envelope for the book. It opens in chapter 1, vanity of vanities, says the preacher, and it closes in chapter 12, vanity of vanities, all is vanity.
It's the main observation from that under-the-sun perspective.
And our sources connect this whole experience of futility back to the fall, back to Genesis 3. This world of thorns and thistles, this frustrating work, it's all a result of sin entering the world.
It's not how things are supposed to be. The preacher reinforces this with another phrase, striving after wind.
Which is just a perfect picture of the action. You run, you work, you build, you chase after the wind.
And your hands are empty at the end.
Every time. And this futility is always defined by that other key phrase, under the sun. That shows up, what, 29 times?
Yeah, about that many.
Yeah.
And it's the boundary condition for the whole experiment. It means looking at life strictly from an earthly standpoint.
A limited perspective. It excludes God's hidden plan. It excludes the final judgment. It's what you can figure out just by human experience and observation alone.
So the book is saying right up front, if you try to find the ultimate meaning of life, using only that limited data set, you will always come to the conclusion that it's all meaningless.
You're doomed to fail.
Yeah.
Your data is incomplete, so your conclusion will be wrong.
So then the preacher starts taking apart all the areas where people try to find that lasting meaning. He starts with the labor trap.
He does. He looks at the world, and all he sees are these endless, monotonous cycles. The sun rises, the sun sets, and then it just hurries back to do it all over again.
The wind blows south, then turns north, going in circles. The rivers all flow to the sea, but the sea is never full.
It's this heavy, grinding repetition. And the implication is there is nothing new under the sun. Our work doesn't fundamentally change anything.
And even if you do build something, the fruit of your labor is temporary. That's what seems to really get to him.
Oh, it's maddening.
Yeah.
You spend your whole life building a business or a reputation, and then you have to leave it all to your heir.
Who might be a complete fool.
Right. A fool who could squander a lifetime of careful work in a single year. The thought just tortures him. It leads to this deep vexation.
The work itself becomes a burden. The worry over it keeps you up at night.
Yeah, he talks about the laborer whose sleep is sweet, whether he has a lot or a little. But the rich man, his abundance, his worries about protecting it, he can't sleep.
The very thing that should bring security becomes the source of his anxiety.
And even when we're successful, our motivations are often corrupt. A lot of human skill, as he calls it, just comes from envy, from trying to one-up your neighbor.
So the whole enterprise is rooted in rivalry and futility from the start.
Now, he's not saying don't work. Proverbs is right. Diligence is good. A fool who doesn't work will starve. But he's warning against the illusion that the work itself will bring you lasting joy.
It's about balance. He says one handful with quiet is better than two handfuls with toil and striving after wind.
Because in the end, it all gets forgotten anyway. The memory of the wise king fades just as quickly as the memory of the fool. Time just erases it all.
So if work doesn't provide meaning, what's next? He turns to the most obvious alternative.
Pleasure, the hedonistic test. And he uses himself, Solomon, as the ultimate case study. This is the big experiment of the book.
He had the wealth, he had the wisdom, and he had total freedom to pursue any pleasure he wanted.
And this wasn't just some, weekend bender. He systematically tested the idea. Can pleasure give my life meaning?
He says he did it with wisdom, too. It was a calculated pursuit of satisfaction.
It was, and the scale is just mind-boggling. He builds massive houses, he plants parks and gardens with every kind of fruit tree, he builds reservoirs to water a whole forest.
This is national-level engineering, just for his own enjoyment.
He piles up silver and gold, he has slaves, he has livestock beyond counting. It's consumerism on a level that's hard to even comprehend.
And then there's the sensory pleasure. He gets the best singers, and of course the harem. Wives and concubines without number.
And he states it so plainly. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. He tried it all. He reached the absolute peak of human experience and pleasure.
So what's the verdict?
Complete failure. After all of that, all the building, the acquiring, the indulging, he looks at it all and says, "Behold, all was vanity and a striving after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun."
It didn't work. It didn't cure that deep sense of emptiness, the ennui.
In fact, it made it worse. Because he had achieved everything and was still empty, he knew for certain that the answer couldn't be found there. If it didn't work for Solomon, it won't work for anyone.
So work is out, pleasure is out. What about the one thing that's supposed to set the wise apart? What about wisdom itself?
This is the most painful part of the analysis, I think. He starts by affirming what Proverbs teaches. Wisdom is absolutely better than folly. Of course it is.
The fool walks in darkness. The wise person is prudent. Folly is never a good option.
But here's the devastating catch. The great crushing insight of Ecclesiastes is that wisdom can actually be a curse.
A curse. How?
Because the wise person sees the absurdity of it all more clearly than the fool does.
So ignorance is bliss. Is that what he's saying? That seems to undermine all of wisdom literature.
It's a tension you have to hold. He's not recommending folly. That's morally wrong. But he's saying the practical advantage of wisdom under the sun is temporary.
Because the same fate awaits both.
The same fate, the wise man dies, the fool dies, and a generation later, both are forgotten. All that intellectual effort ends in the same grave.
He says, he who increases knowledge increases sorrow.
Because you see the brokenness more clearly. You see the things that can't be fixed. You understand that life is an unhappy business God has given us. And worse, your wisdom is fragile.
What do you mean?
Tell that little story about the poor wise man who saves his city. A brilliant act of wisdom. And what happens?
Nobody remembers him. His wisdom is despised.
Exactly. Wisdom doesn't protect you from being forgotten or ignored. It's valuable, but its reward in this life is vapor. It's Hebel.
This leads right into the next section, which is just this raw look at injustice and how powerless we are. It makes sense that he'd say, so I hated life.
The feeling is completely understandable. The world looks completely mad. He says injustice thrives in the very places where justice is supposed to be found. In the courts, in the halls of power.
And this is what just vexes the righteous person. There's no clear cause and effect between being good and having a good life.
None. You see the wicked getting ahead, living long, prosperous lives, while the righteous suffer and die young.
For someone whose worldview is shaped by Proverbs, where there's a general sense of order, that observation is just devastating. It makes you question if God is even paying attention.
Again, you have to remember the hermeneutical key. The preacher sees the injustice, he feels it deeply, but he immediately follows it up. In 3.17, he says, God will judge the righteous and the wicked.
So the present chaos doesn't cancel out the future judgment.
It doesn't. That final reckoning is the anchor that keeps the whole thing from drifting into despair. But it doesn't make the present any less painful. At times, he says, it seems like we have no advantage over the animals. We all just die and turn to dust.
He gets incredibly bleak. He looks at the oppressed, who have no one to comfort them, and says it would be better to be dead. Or even better, to have never been born at all.
And on top of the injustice, there's just the sheer randomness of it all, the unpredictability.
This is in chapter 9, right? The race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong.
Yes, because time and chance happen to them all.
That is such a humbling thought, especially for us today. We think we can control everything with our planning and our metrics.
But you can't. You can be the fastest runner, the strongest warrior, But a random accident can undo it all in a second. Things completely outside of our control determine so much of our lives.
He says we're like fish caught in a net or birds in a snare. We're just trapped suddenly, with no warning.
It all adds up to this one conclusion. We don't manage our lives. Life manages us. That famous poem about time, a time to be born, a time to die,
A time to weep, a time to laugh.
it shows that we're always responding to circumstances. We're not in the driver's seat. We can't change the basic structure of the world.
He asks that rhetorical question, who can make straight what he has made crooked?
And the answer is nobody. We can't fix the fundamental brokenness. We certainly can't control the ultimate uncontrollable death.
No man has power over the day of death. It just comes, and all our wisdom and wealth are useless against it.
We are just trapped in this opaque, mysterious present. We don't have the big picture. And that powerlessness extends to our finances too.
Yeah, he comes back to wealth and how it fails to bring happiness. He says loving money never satisfies you because the more you have, the more people there are to help you spend it.
And your net gain in happiness is zero. We talked about how it deprives the rich of sleep, and it can all vanish overnight in a bad venture.
All that work was just for the wind.
Then he gives that tragic, almost unbelievable illustration. The man who has everything, 100 children, a long life, great wealth, but he never actually enjoys it.
He says a stillborn child is better off than that man.
It sounds so shocking. But from the under-the-sun perspective, the stillborn at least finds immediate rest. It avoids a lifetime of meaningless striving that ends in sorrow.
So life is precious. A living dog is better than a dead lion, but it's also bafflingly futile because of death and randomness. But he doesn't leave us there.
No, this is the turn. This is where all that darkness and frustration gets converted into true wisdom, the sovereign antidote.
And it all comes back to fearing God.
It does. Because even if things look completely wrong in the moment, God is the one who will ultimately assess every life. The preacher says it so clearly in chapter 8.
Even though a sinner does evil 100 times and lives a long life.
Yet I know that it will be well with those who fear God, but it will not be well with the wicked.
So there is an ultimate justice, even if we can't see it now. The present confusion shouldn't lead us to doubt God's rule.
In fact, the confusion has a purpose. God has designed the world this way to humble us.
That's a huge idea. He says in 3.16, I perceived that whatever God does endures forever. God has done it so that people fear before him.
God intentionally makes things crooked so that we stop relying on our own plans and start relying on him. We have to learn that we are not the masters of the universe.
We have to stand in awe of him. The fact that the world is confusing is actually a grace, a mercy to keep us from our own pride.
And part of that fear of God is just practical wisdom. He says, the wise person thinks about death. Pondering the end makes you live more carefully in the present.
If you know you can't control your last day, you're less likely to be obsessed with controlling every last dollar.
Right. But it's not all doom and gloom. There's this other major theme that keeps popping up. In the midst of all this toil and sorrow, what are we supposed to do?
Enjoy life.
Yes. Enjoy the good moments. This isn't the hedonism he rejected before. This is different. This is about receiving joy as a gift from God.
That passage in chapter 2 is key. There is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God.
That's the theological pivot. Joy is not a human achievement. It's a divine grant. It's grace.
So you don't earn it through hard work or cleverness. It's just a gift that comes unexpectedly.
Exactly. And since we can't figure out God's grand plan from beginning to end, the right response isn't to despair over the confusion,
but to humbly and gratefully accept the good gifts he gives us day by day.
And this gift isn't a guarantee. He's very clear about that in chapter 7. In the day of prosperity, be joyful, and in the day of adversity, consider. God has made the one as well as the other.
God is sovereign over both the good days and the bad days. He keeps the future hidden from us.
So that man may not find out anything that will be after him. He keeps us ignorant of the future so that we can't try to manipulate him or control the outcome. We are kept in a state of dependence.
Fearing God means we recognize we can't control his favor. Joy is unearned.
It is. So the final instruction is clear. Since you can't figure it all out, fear God and rejoice in the good things he gives you. And do it now, while you're young.
Yeah, that section on old age is so vivid and, frankly, a little terrifying. He tells young people to enjoy their youth, but to remember their Creator before those hard days come.
And the poetry he uses to describe physical decline is just powerful. The sun and moon are darkened. The strong men, the legs stoop. The grinding ceases because the teeth are gone.
The doors on the street are shut because you can't hear. You wake up at the sound of a bird because you can't sleep.
Your hair turns white like an almond tree in blossom. You walk stiffly like a grasshopper dragging itself along, and desire fails.
The message is, use the vitality you have now in service and remembrance of God. Don't wait until it's too late, until the dust returns to the earth and the spirit returns to God who gave it.
So it all comes together. Life under the sun is crooked, unfair, and seems to end in nothing.
But you should still find joy in the good days when they come, sing them as a gift. And in the middle of all this confusion, you fear God and trust him.
Because he will reward those who fear and obey him, even if that reward is totally invisible from our perspective right now.
So to sum it all up, this deep dive really shows that Ecclesiastes is not a book of nihilism. It's a vital theological corrective. It affirms God's rule, but it forces us to be humble about how much of that rule we can actually understand.
Right. It's a pushback against any simple mechanical view of the world. It forces us to look beyond this life, to see the need for a final judgment, to make sense of all the present chaos.
And our response should be that mix of fear, obedience, and gratitude for the small daily gifts.
And you can see how this lays a foundation for the New Testament worldview. Romans 8 talks about creation being subjected to futility. Paul understood Hebel.
We still live in that fallen world, but the gospel goes further. Jesus Christ has come. The kingdom has been inaugurated.
And now we show our fear of God by being reconciled to him through Christ. We still work hard, but we're commanded not to be anxious because our Father knows what we need.
The new creation has begun in Christ. So while we're still physically under the sun, we have this hope of a new heavens and a new earth where righteousness dwells. Our labor in the Lord is not in vain.
That's the ultimate answer to the preacher's dilemma.
So as we wrap up, maybe here's something for you to think about this week.
Yeah, a practical takeaway.
If the preacher is telling us that you can't manufacture or control joy through your own efforts, what are the specific ways that we still try to do that, even with good things, like our work or our planning for the future?
That's a great question. In what ways do we still try to earn the joy that God only gives as a gift?
Think about your daily approach to work and life. How much of our anxiety, our fear of losing things, or our drive for more is really an attempt to manage a future we can't control?
Instead of just living today, recognizing that the final judgment is what truly matters, how much energy do we spend trying to make straight the very things God has allowed to remain crooked in our lives to keep us dependent on him?
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Ecclesiastes. We hope it helps you to read this amazing book with your eyes fixed firmly on our sovereign God.